that the civic space is being constricted. A lot of the feedback that we got, especially from the civil society organizations, is that that attempt to suppress what some of them felt was a legitimate protest has resulted in the constriction of the civil space. If you also talk to the security agencies, which we did, they were concerned that such a protest could deteriorate and lead to anarchy. And so they deployed actively in an attempt to prevent that protest from becoming a situation of anarchy. Of course, some of the indicators of foreign influence was also something that we documented. Russian flags were being waved. Polish students from Poland were arrested during the protest, even though the circumstances of their involvement and their arrest is well documented. The effect of social media in terms of what happened in Niger Republic and the populism that the junta there pursued and its influence in the northern states, we also documented that. And then, of course, the disparity in the protest between certain locations in the country, and of course, some of the locations where we saw more involvement of youth and civil society organizations, and then also the responses of our security forces to the protest. In certain instances, the responses were highly commendable. Then, unfortunately, in certain instances, we documented human rights abuses by the security forces. At the end of the day, I think the question that really emerged is the credibility of the state in terms of managing dissent. That is one question that I think has remained and that unfortunately is yet to be addressed.
Also, because that document reported that on a regional level, 3 regions were impacted. The Northwest region, which accounted for 56.67% of fatalities, the North Central region, 23.33%, and the Northeast region, 20%. But looking back at that, to that protest and the way it turned out, you would agree with me that it brought about some conversations begging for answers, especially questions about the disappointing scenes from the northern part of the country. You just talked about foreign flags were flown within Nigeria's sovereignty, which was condemned across board. But does this also speak to perhaps the division and disparity in ideology within the political class in the north?
So there are so many factors, and just like we've documented in our report, we've tried to divide them into 4 parts. The socioeconomic issues, poverty, illiteracy, unemployment, the existence of groups that some would describe as hooligans. There are different terminologies that are being used to describe those youths. They exist in certain parts of the north. Groups that either cult groups or gangs that in one way or the other were engaged and involved. And that brings me to the next point, which is the political component. Some politicians saw the protest as an avenue and as an opportunity to exact influence, negative influence, I must say. And so they mobilized these groups, including the cult, the gangs, and some of the criminal groups. And in some instances, even possibly armed them. And we saw that. The next component is the economic component. The cost of living crisis created an incentive, as it were, for certain persons to take advantage. So you saw warehouses. A good example is Jigawa, where warehouses were raided and the contents of those warehouses were stolen by the protesters. And I think a few other locations, including some parts of Bauchi State, where we saw that. In Kano State, we saw public infrastructure. For me, the most ridiculous was a traffic light that one of these young persons was attempting to remove. And I think I also saw on social media, we couldn't verify that, where a certain traffic light was stolen, and then the guy actually connected it in his room, and he was using it. So, things like that were example of the breakdown of law and order, and the fact that the economic circumstance in the country could have triggered those type of occurrences. And then the weakness of the security arrangement. At the end of the day, public security is really about deterrence. It's really about ensuring that law-abiding citizens like you and I are able to carry out their businesses as long as it's legal and lawful, without the consequences of illegal activities. like what I've just described. And that failed, unfortunately, during the 10 days. Our constituency, the company that I run, which is Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, we provide risk management advice to companies. And I can tell you that during that period, a significant number of business operations were either reduced or were shut down. Supply chains were disrupted. Companies like Dangote and the other big ones, BOA, that would supply materials, either in terms of the raw materials they needed or the finished products that they would supply across the country, were disrupted during that period for about 10 days. If you calculate the impact of that, banks were shut down during that period. As a result, they were managing their risk, because if they open, they could be targeted and their staff could also be targeted. So they naturally either reduced or shut down their operations. So all of that were quote-unquote economic consequences of the protest.
But there was a part of, Dr. Adamu, there was a part of that document where you thought the security agencies should have handled things differently.
Definitely. There is a whole lot of material on what is called policing 2.0 protest, modern protest, in other words. And policing 2.0 protest or 2.0 protest requires a different approach. For the simple reason that the mobilization that we used to know in traditional terms is not the mobilization that occurs in 2.0 protest. So the number one rule for policing 2.0 protest is really about engagement. What we saw in this instance, the engagement came very late. You would engage on the basis of intelligence. By the time you engage, you would have gathered intelligence, you know the leadership of the protesters, you know their modus operandi, and then you also know their intention. And the intention can be varied. There is the latent intention, there is the manifest intention. So intelligence will tell you both. And when you are engaging, you are engaging on the basis of strength. Unfortunately, we didn't see that. In the case of that August protest, the engagement came just a few days. And it was an engagement that was, if you allow me to say with all sense of responsibility, that was done without that level of intelligence. When you engage and you are discussing with the other side.
Dr. Adamu, could you be specific, please?
The Inspector General of Police, as an example, engaged with the protesters. But the kind of language that we saw was not a language that was driven by knowledge, by intelligence. It was more around saying, don't protest in this location, come up with your leadership. So if intelligence was already available, the leadership would have been known. It was pointless at that stage asking for the leadership to emerge. It is expected that the entire security gamut in Nigeria already has knowledge of the leadership of those protesters. So when you engage at that point, it's really to tell them this is what you want. Look, we know you are going to protest. We're going to give you the protection that you need. This is the route that you are going to follow. This is the kind of deployment we are going to do to ensure that your protest is protected. And this is the do's and don'ts, quote unquote, that we wouldn't want to see when you are protesting. If you intend to deliver a letter, where are you going to deliver that letter? What do you need from us? So that's the kind of engagement that I would have expected. We saw it in certain locations. I must commend the then Commissioner of Police in Rivers State, to an extent the Commissioner of Police in Lagos State. I think they managed the protest, as it were, slightly better than we saw in other locations. What happened in Abuja for me was a huge embarrassment. It could have been done better. We saw instances of heavy-handedness. We saw journalists being molested. We saw civil society activists being molested in the Federal Capital Territory. All of this, for me, were necessary. If we had done our work as a country with about 29 security departments, if they had come together and done their work and gathered intelligence using technology, I must emphasize this, because most of the mobilization happened within the cyberspace. If they had done their intelligence gathering in the manner that made them conscious of the fact that this is a 2.0 protest, it's not your traditional protest, and they had gathered the intelligence, perhaps the approach would have been better. One of the things that I'm hoping has been done, I don't know if it was done, a review of what went well in terms of the approach by the security agencies, what didn't go well, what lessons have been learned, so that there will be other protests. I'm hoping nothing as major as that, but it's very likely there will be other protests. Are we still going to approach it in the manner that we approached the last one, or are we going to use those lessons learned to approach it better? I've given some tips, but there's still a lot more that I think we can do in terms of improving both the intelligence collection ahead of the protest and then the types of deployment. One of the things that I think we can also improve upon is the equipment repository for our, especially police, in managing protest. Cordoning off protesters requires unique equipment in modern day protest. You don't use the type of force, but you can cordon them off psychologically using technology. And because it's a public space, I'm very conscious of what I am saying, but there is technology out there. And this is not even sophisticated technology, equipment that you can use in cordoning off protesters so that the route they pass are routes that are cordoned off, and then you reduce infiltration. You also reduce the possibility that they can now go and destroy public property because you've already cordoned the route and you provided that. So these are some of the errors or mistakes that I saw in terms of the handling and that we've documented in that report.
All right. So still about the notable developments in September 2024, which you highlighted in your report. You mentioned the heightened military operations observed in the Northwest region that led to the death of key bandit leaders and the establishment of a joint military theater operation and the reception of T-129 helicopters from Turkey to enhance counterinsurgency efforts. So for you, it reflects, according to that report, it reflects the federal government's commitment to tackle security issues. Is this confirming that concerted efforts by governments are yielding the desired results?
We are not in doubt that the federal government is committed to addressing the security challenges, but commitment and results are two different things. I started this conversation by saying that as far as we are concerned and as far as we know, there is no strategy that would allow the measurement of success. Security can never be implemented in a vacuum. When we had a challenge in the Northeast, we quickly developed a national counterterrorism strategy. I asked the big question, what is our strategy for addressing the banditry challenge in the Northwest and North Central Nigeria? So this, I think, is the major challenge. The commitment is there, and I must give the Bola Tinubu Ahmed administration significant kudos. If you pick the Renewed Hope agenda, there are several elements, about 8 of them, that speaks to security. With reference to your question, the one that comes to my mind is the promise that security strategies will be developed for each of the geopolitical regions. I would have thought that the coordinators of our national security structure would have worked within the last 1 year plus to develop these strategies for each of the geopolitical regions, because there are different security threat elements in each of the geopolitical regions, so that those strategies will form the basis for coordination, for cooperation, and for collaboration between our security agencies. And I'm sorry to say, just like I said at the beginning, we haven't seen those strategies in place at the moment. And it's only when we have those strategies that we'll be able to measure meaningful success. At the moment, one of the things that pains me, and it's really the absence of those strategies. The federal government, in some instances, have positions that are in contradiction with what the state governments have in terms of approach to security. Meanwhile, our enemy, the threat elements, are united in terms of their desire to wield violence to us. But our government, the federal and state government, are not united in terms of that.
So, Dr. Adamu, I asked the question because you also mentioned other events reflecting an evolving legislative framework in ways that supports the aspirations of the populace for more effective state governance structures and an inclusive and stable political environment. Just today, the federal government's commitment to strengthening Nigeria's military capabilities through improved research and development has been reiterated by Minister of Defense, Mohammed Badaru. So how do we enhance and strengthen this aspect of our operations?
Let's quickly develop a broad strategy for each of the threat elements that we have. And there are not so many. There are 3, I think, at the moment that are disturbing a lot of Nigerians. Number 1 is the banditry. Let's quickly have a broad strategy, a framework for addressing the banditry challenge. That framework, that strategy should look at the pull factors. Why are we seeing more young people getting involved in the banditry challenge? Why are we seeing groups challenging the supremacy of the use of force by the state? That strategy should be able to have mitigation measures embedded within them to reduce recruitment, to reduce funding, to reduce the equipment acquisition by these groups, to reduce the support that they're getting from within the ecospace where they operate. It will also allow the three levels of government to key in and you work in unison. And then more importantly, it will also allow the implementers to get the buy-in of the local populace at the end of the day. That for me is number one. Number two is oil theft. Our economy is dependent of, I think, almost about 37 or 38% our GDP on oil. And at the moment, our economy is bleeding because we're unable to even meet our both local demands and then the OPEC quota that would have gotten us the revenue for the economy to function. Just yesterday, OPEC did say that we're at 1.32 million barrels instead of the 2.2, I think, that we've been given as a country. And, we can't continue like that. We need to call a spade, and where changes are required to ensure that the effectiveness and the efficiency of the military security strategy that we have for stopping oil theft is achieved, then we need to do that. Otherwise, our economy will continue to bleed. You and I are suffering from that bleeding economy. I can't even say enough about that. Then number three is kidnapping. This is something that is worrying every Nigerian. People, can't travel freely. Loved ones are being abducted. They have to pay ransom, and some people are shocked that some of the perpetrators actually go on social media to brag about the monies they've collected. So we need a grand strategy, a broad strategy on anti-kidnapping that would bring both the federal and state governments together, and of course strengthen law enforcement to ensure that banditry, kidnapping in particular, is brought to an end. I think these three things. The other ones, I think we already have strategies on them, like terrorism. I mentioned that we have a national counterterrorism strategy, which is in place. But for all of these other ones, I haven't seen really a strategy, codified one, that would help us in addressing them.
All right, Dr. Adamu, let's go on a break. And when we come back, we will continue with this report and other security matters. Please stay with us, everyone.
I'm Miriam Lunge. I'm a passionate environment advocate and a published author.
I am the founder of Celebration, a businesswoman, and a fashion icon.
I am a wealth coach and a real estate developer.
I am Amako Arakwe. I'm a corporate commercial lawyer and an entrepreneur.
Barkamu da warhaka. I am Ramatu Shehu Oyibo, an entrepreneur and a business coach.
I am the voice of an average Muslim woman, an hijabite, and a lawyer.
I am a polymath and a serial entrepreneur.
I am Murayo Afolabi Brown, Managing Director, TVC Entertainment. I'm a media consultant, producer, and broadcaster.
The ladies of your view are made of women from different professions, tribes, cultures, and religion. Join us every Monday to Friday as we share our views on topical and social issues.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. Tonight, Dr. Kabir Adamu, CEO, Beacon Consulting Limited, is my guest tonight as we track the destructive impact of banditry in the northern region of Nigeria. Dr. Adamu, thanks a lot for staying with us. In that report, you pointed out the reception of T-129 helicopters from Turkey to enhance counterinsurgency efforts. So help us understand this. Is it really about more equipment and ammunition? Because a report released in August says that the federal government has spent no less than 63.6 billion naira to procure various equipment and ammunition for the Nigerian military and the Office of the National Security Advisor between January and July 2024. Just recently also, the Minister of State for Defense, Bello Matawalle, is saying that the Armed Forces of Nigeria requires 200 million rounds of ammunition annually for its operations.
So definitely, the equipment repository of all our security agencies needs to be enhanced, and any effort to procure needed equipment, I must emphasize that, because it's not just any equipment, it must be equipment that would help address specific security challenges. And in this instance, helicopters and other gunboats are necessary in especially the types of security challenges that we have in the country. Close quarter combat and our ability to have monopoly over our airspace will definitely strengthen all types of campaigns that we have, whether it's counter-insurgency, counter-terrorism, or anti-banditry, or even the oil theft. Helicopters and other air platforms would definitely help in that regard. Now, any equipment, including helicopters, that can conduct either exercises that are of an interdiction nature or for surveillance purposes would also be useful. Mm-hmm. And so in that regard, I think this particular acquisition of helicopters is quite commendable. We need more of such to assist, especially the Air Force and to an extent the Army, and possibly even other security departments at some point to manage some of the threat elements. So yes, I think this is highly commendable. Some other equipment purchases are questionable because, for instance, when you buy certain aircraft for the type of asymmetric warfare that we have in Nigeria, it brings the question on whether we took into consideration the specific requirements of our armed forces or the other security department for purchasing those equipment. But for this particular one, I think it's commendable, and I think it would be really helpful to the armed forces of Nigeria in the implementation of some of the campaigns that are ongoing at the moment.
Absolutely. You know, tonight you've repeatedly talked about technology and surveillance. So the use of technology and satellite monitoring to enhance the regulation and monitoring of mining activities in some states was also highlighted in that report. First, has banning mining helped in any way? And I'm asking because it's exactly a year since the Minister of Solid Minerals Development, Dele Alake, gave miners engaged in the legal extraction of mineral resources in the country an ultimatum of 30 days to join notable mining cooperatives or face the full wrath of the law. So has this helped?
With all due respect and with a sense of responsibility, no. The reality, and this is what we try to highlight in our report, there are drivers of insecurity in Nigeria, and as long as those drivers are not addressed, then no matter the type of force that is used, it will not solve the challenge. So in this instance, artisanal mining is still ongoing across the country by different players, some of them local, others international. Mm. And the reason is because there is a demand for those items. So coming out with a statement, a fiat, saying using the word banning without addressing the root causes, the drivers, which is the access to those minerals, and then the ability of the players, I mentioned local, I mentioned international, to access and continue the mining. And then more importantly, their ability to access markets. So this is one thing that we've not done enough in Nigeria. If you regulate the market and reduce the ability of the bad elements to access that market, then some of these elements will naturally die. In this instance, people are still able to mine these items. You know, is it gold? Is it columbite? Is it all the wealth that we have in Nigeria, the minerals? They're still able to access them, mine them, and they're still able to take them out, either locally or internationally. So, yes, the minister has made that statement, but unfortunately, the drivers are still there, and so you still have artisanal mining going on.
But Dr. Adamu, from your findings, because I tried to look for it in this document, I couldn't find it. Is there a comprehensive list of legal miners in these states? Do you think a comprehensive data would help reduce the activities of illegal miners in most of the states?
Definitely. And this is what we try to do at Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, to show that data and intelligence can assist in managing security occurrences. In the course of our conversation, I've repeatedly used the word intelligence. Now, your question speaks specifically around intelligence. Knowing the list of illegal miners, the owners of the licenses, the governors that are collaborating with them, because we need to admit that the governors are not happy with the current arrangement, where it's the federal government that issues the licenses, and then they don't have any say, as it were, in determining who comes to mine in their states. So that needs to be changed. And if you have that kind of information that shows who are behind certain elements, in Zamfara State, as an example, mining is still ongoing. And it just takes a little bit of intelligence for you to know who is behind the mining, who have engaged non-state actors to support the mining activities. And then, like I mentioned, where are the markets? It will shock you that at a point, the market was here in Abuja. And in some of the big hotels that are in Abuja, all you needed to do was do a sting operation to say you want to buy gold. And you'll be shocked at where you'll be taken to buy gold here in Abuja. So this is the type of approach that I think we need to take. Again, Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited can assist in that regard, in identifying key players, in identifying the markets, and more importantly, in identifying the dynamics that allow these types of things to take place.
So, Dr. Adamu, how soon should this happen for us to have some level of sanity in that sector?
Yesterday, as far as I'm concerned, because this is key to our economy. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the mainstay of the economy, which is oil, is bleeding. So any ability to diversify and raise our revenue generation through other means, including the mining sector, the solid minerals, should have happened yesterday. And we're playing with kid gloves around the issue. The various components of the security department that have responsibility for intelligence, I think, need to take it more seriously. And I think this is a wake-up call for the minister to engage with them and try to get them to conduct in-depth intelligence collection of the various elements that I've mentioned that are responsible for the artisanal mining and the selling of, as it were, illegally mined activities. I mentioned international players. It's well documented. And I think customs, too, would need to play a role in that regard, as well as, to an extent, even the federal fund, Airport Authority of Nigeria.
So if I'm to go by your words, Dr. Adamu, you say that Nigeria's security landscape has been further complicated by a series of safety concerns. So from this report, this includes transportation accidents, including on road and water bodies, the outbreak of diseases such as monkeypox. But in this report, you focused on widespread flooding, severe weather conditions characterized by intense rainfall, you say has resulted in widespread flooding. So this natural disaster has had devastating consequences. Would you say that generally most of the national policies and programs pertaining to food security do not account for how flooding can impact food security negatively?
Unfortunately, no. And I think the last I think it was the Federal Executive Council meeting, which I think we referred to in that report, which took into consideration that development and then ordered an audit of our dams, kind of admitted to that. But I think, I believe that more should have been done. We have a Ministry of Environment, we have the Ecological Fund, we have also different components of our governance structure. Monies usually in our budget expended for different things. I think that the question should have arisen on why those components in government did not do what they were supposed to do. Even, simple awareness raising and sensitization to allow people to understand.
Dr. Adamu, pardon me, when you say more needs to be done, who should be doing what? Are northern governors doing enough?
Frankly, no, they need to do more. They are players in that regard. They are also victims in terms of that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really about implementing adaptation measures against climate change. And then some very basic things. People who are living in areas that are susceptible to flooding, certain governors have been proactive in terms of identifying those places and then moving them from those places, allocating, better suited land and supporting them in terms of developing those land with infrastructure and sometimes even some fund to build in those locations. And then, of course, drainages, making sure drainages are built, the integrity of dams, which may be the responsibility of the federal government. And then, like I was saying, even basic awareness of the consequences of climate change and the need to introduce adaptation measures would be something that I say the Ministry of Environment and a few other players, including Ministry of Finance, should have invested in, so that as a country, we recognize that things have changed. Climate change is already here with us. There will be variation in terms of rainfall and perhaps even in terms of the quantity. And then, of course, some of the other natural factors like the integrity of our dams that I've mentioned earlier on. And a few other factors would lead to more flooding. But we need to be ready. We can't wait until it happens. We need to be proactive. And, governors can play huge roles in that regard. But it must be a joint effort between all the stakeholders, the federal government, the state government, and to an extent even our development partners. I think places like the World Bank, the United Nations are also doing a lot. Several intervention programs that are being supported by the World Bank and some of our development partners are also trying to address this issue of flooding. But it must be a stakeholder approach, multi-stakeholder.
But beyond the northern region of this country, I want us to talk generally now about the security implication of climate change like flooding. How critical is this for a country like Nigeria? When you look at loss of lives, displacement of millions of individuals, extensive damage to properties and infrastructure, and a significant impact on agricultural productivity.
It's critical. The consequences, honestly, can only be understood if you look at the far-reaching and wide-reaching consequences. There is no sector that may not be affected by the flooding. Health, public health is affected. Infrastructure is being destroyed. Food security is being affected. Name them. Business operations. There are several parts of the country at the moment, including places like Kogi and others that are currently inaccessible as a result of flooding. So the impact is really huge. And we must acknowledge and admit that this is a phenomenon that has come to stay. It's not something that we can wish away. So again, adaptation measures. There is a lot of technology at the moment that allows us to look at our environment and then introduce those adaptation measures to reduce the impact. We can't fight nature. So the best we can do is to introduce adaptation measures to reduce the impact of climate change. And the earlier we start doing that, the better for us. It's still shocking that some of the environmental degradation, environmental destruction that increases our vulnerability is still being done. Our rocks are still being destroyed. Forests are still being felled. Name them. The dumping of refuse in our drainages are still ongoing at the moment. Sadly, these are some of the consequences that are resulting in the flooding that we're seeing at the moment.
Right. I want to talk about cybersecurity issues, which was also highlighted in your reports. But before then, would you say a lot of gain had been made against insurgency in the Northeast? If you look at Bauchi State, Gombe, Taraba, and Yobe, or there was just a desperate attempt by the governors to create that image of normalcy?
No, definitely. The Northeast is, we've seen great improvement in the Northeast. Part of the reasons is that I mentioned at the beginning that a counter-terrorism strategy is being implemented. And then this, in particular, the most affected state, Borno State, introduced what is called the Borno model that has allowed local population to key into that national counter-terrorism strategy. And so we're seeing tremendous successes in that regard. It's not yet Uhuru. There are still active groups, non-state armed groups, terrorist groups that are active in those locations. The Jamaat al-Islam al-Jawat wal-Jihad and the Islamic State in West Africa province, they're still active. But if you compare to what used to be and where we are at the moment, tremendous progress has been achieved. In the report, we did highlight a particular incident that happened in Yobe State, where these groups that I mentioned, in a reprisal attack, killed about 90 people in just one attack. So there are still instances of such heinous attacks, but the frequency and the lethality of those attacks have reduced tremendously compared to what it used to be. If you look at the percentage that the Northeast represent, it's much lower in both in terms of abduction and fatality than the Northwest and North Central. So at the moment, the epicenter of security challenges in Nigeria is the Northwest. The Northeast has been overtaken by the Northwest.
So, Dr. Adamu, your report also covered cybersecurity issues, including Google Chrome vulnerability exploited by cyber attackers, just as you put it. So for Nigeria, experts say Nigeria is more prone to cyber attacks than any other developing nation in the world. And it's the fact that it's one of the most unregulated, most dangerous space that portends some of our greatest national security challenges is the cyberspace. Evaluation of our Cybersecurity Act, how else can we protect our cyberspace?
So there are several factors. I think the Cybersecurity Act is a good development. However, its implementation and then making sure we raise the awareness of the public. Just before I came onto this program, I received a WhatsApp message, which I'm sure a lot of Nigerians received on a daily basis. So it came from someone in my contact, and it went something like, I'm unable to pay money using my bank app. Please help me pay 200,000 into a particular account. I'm sure you've probably received this in the past, or some of our listeners at the moment have done that. The moment I saw that, I know the person's WhatsApp number has been hacked, and the effrontery of writing and providing a bank account through which these monies are collected is part of the challenges. So I think raising awareness, because a lot of people will actually fall victim. They will go ahead and pay that money, and the criminals will go and cash in and collect their money, But when we raise awareness for people to really understand, and then there are some very simple things that you can do to increase the protection.
So how do we continue to raise awareness, Dr. Adamu?
By engaging with the public and by sending out messages, especially in the social media. The two-factor authentication, as an example, most people don't even know this. Something as basic as that, just two-factor authentication. For every cyber platform that you belong to, just simply activate your two-factor authentication. So even when there is an attempt to hack that particular platform, if you have a two-factor authentication in place, it makes it extremely difficult. The person will have to have access to that other platform that you've combined with that one for him to do that. It's almost impossible or difficult for that to happen. So that's really number one. And number two is to allow experts to do their work, especially for corporate organizations. We, as a country, we haven't invested enough in the cyberspace. You see companies who are using the cyberspace, but they are reluctant to invest in cybersecurity. The more we move into the cyberspace, the more criminals move there. So the same way you are investing in physical security, you have to invest in cybersecurity so that you protect yourself and you protect your clients. And then, of course, thirdly, is the role of government. The Cyber Act is very clear. We need to have a robust and strong regulatory presence within the cyberspace. And I don't want to get mad in the politics of who should control it, but fine. we need to have it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dr. Kabir Adamu, CEO, Beacon Consulting Limited, as we go through this report together. And I must say that this is a well-detailed report, and thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you so much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone.
Do you love cocktails? Would you like to sample free cocktails, network, and have fun? Enjoy cocktail offers Thursday the 17th and Friday the 18th of October at the Cocktail Village, Balmoral Convention Center, Federal Palace Hotel, Victoria Island from 4 p.m. and across all our registered bars in Lagos. Buy your wristbands online at www.lagoscocktail.com. For further inquiries, call 0903 970 2993. This event is sponsored by the Lagos State Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Sterling Bank, Balmoral Events, Uber Nigeria, Eventi Cocktails, Chivas, Absolute Vodka, Olmeca Tequila, Jack Daniels, Schweppes, Gin Mare, Element Irish Whiskey, TVC, and Max FM.
Drink responsibly.
So creamy, tastes better with Cremella.
Enjoy the deliciously rich taste of Cremella Crema.
For any other choice of meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even between meals.
It's hard to resist the deliciously rich taste of Cremella. It tastes better with Cremella.
The following is a paid presentation by ShopX TV. Are you tired of spending countless hours in the kitchen, wrestling with cumbersome appliances, and juggling multiple tasks just to prepare a single meal? Frustrated with messy cleanups from different tools that never seem to get the job done right? Do you wish there was one solution that could handle all your blending, chopping, and grinding needs effortlessly? Introducing the CookX 4-in-1 Blender. It's a food processor, a mixer, a grinder, a blender, and a juicer, all in one. Our CookX 4-in-1 blender is here to take your cooking to a whole new level. This versatile blender comes with 3 convenient cup sizes, each designed for specific tasks to make your life easier. First, the 650 ml cup, perfect for mincing meat, pounding yam, and chopping vegetables. Save time and effort with this powerful accessory. Next, the 450 ml cup, ideal for grinding coffee, spices, and more. And the 1.8 liter cup, perfect for blending fruits for smoothies, peppers, and yes, even blending beans. Lastly, the CookX 4-in-1 blender comes with a convenient filter. Now, you can create delicious, nutritious smoothies and meals with ease. The secret of the CookX blender is the 800-watt motor combined with a precision extractor blade that gives you the power to turn ordinary foods into extraordinary foods. And different speeds give you the complete control you need. Savory stew, delicious egusi, tasty blended beans for akara and moi moi, pounded yam, and everything in between.
The CookX 4-in-1 blender has been a game changer for me. It takes the hassle out of meal prep and lets me whip up healthy treats for my family in no time.
The CookX 4-in-1 blender is the only blender I use in my kitchen. Its variable speed control lets me achieve the exact texture I need for each dish.
With its easy twist locking technology and powerful motor, the CookX 4-in-1 blender is engineered to tackle the blending challenge you face.
The global best-selling CookX 4-in-1 blender is now available in Nigeria, exclusively from ShopX TV. Call the number on the screen now and get the CookX 4-in-1 blender for just 189,915 naira. The CookX 4-in-1 blender comes with one powerful 800W motor base, one easy twist extractor blade, one 1.8 liter cup, one 650 ml cup, one 450 ml cup, one filter, 2 lids, and one dry